Hey guys, welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. Where we left off, we were rearranging some ships here at the space station, and this shuttle was about to depart for the Mun. So let's go ahead and get our everything activated and closed up here, and batten down the hatches and so forth, and get this thing out to the Mun Station so we can actually get a crew on board, and we'll have 2 active space stations. So this is going to be really the first test of this thing. There's no reason it shouldn't work, but I probably should have tested it beforehand, but this is going to be our maiden voyage, I guess. So get the lights on so we can actually see it a little bit better here, and get our course plotted out to the Mun here. So it should have plenty of delta V to get there and back, and it will probably have to refuel fairly regularly, unfortunately. It's got relatively efficient engines, of course, those Nerva engines, but still, it does mean a little bit of annoyance in the fuel game here, but I think it'll be alright. And let's just go ahead and get this thing en route here. Be glad to get away from the space station. Not that the frame rate's slowing down too much, but it is slowing down, so kind of nice to get this thing on course here and get a little distance between us and the space station. Kind of in a weird angle on the space station there. It feels like it needs solar panels on the other side too, but I kind of don't need that many solar panels, especially now that it has a nuclear reactor on board. It's got plenty of power. And we'll engage the auto warp and slowly drift apart here. Whoa, not so slowly maybe. And the burn is coming up here. Real quick, it's one of my favorite features of MechJeb is the auto warp, because I don't have to worry about overshooting any of the burns, which is a real problem for me. I frequently do overshoot things like that, so it's kind of nice not having to be so concerned about that. But it's not too big of a burn. From here it's like 715 meters of delta V, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. And we'll just go ahead and get this thing done here. We're gonna catch up with the space station here again? Kind of doesn't look like it. Looks like we'll be close, but not really do a flyby. So we have arrived out at the Mun, and I have the docking autopilot engaged. It's of course dark, because it's pretty much always dark when it seems like when I'm doing stuff. But there's plenty of lights here on the space station and on the ship, so shouldn't have too much of a problem seeing what's going on here. And so, just kind of sliding in here at a pretty slow pace here. But I didn't want to go too quickly and have things go crazy. Plus the autopilot's actually engaged now. So, I do use MechJeb a lot, because for things like this I'm usually listening to a podcast or something while I'm doing this, because otherwise, frankly, a lot of this would be just dreadfully boring to do. I edit this down quite a bit, so for every like 20-minute episode that I probably have like 2 or 3 hours worth of footage, so it just makes things a little bit easier on me to have other things to do, especially when I'm doing those really long-term burns. And actually, I just realized I'm doing post-commentary here. This is not the Mun Station. This is a module that we launched in the previous episode that ran out of fuel. I miscalculated the fuel needs here. So this is not actually made it out to the space station yet. It's in orbit of the Mun, but it doesn't have the fuel necessary to do the rendezvous. This Mun shuttle has tons of extra fuel on board, so what we're going to do is transfer fuel to this thing, and we'll do the rendezvous separately. So the Mun shuttle will head over to the space station, and then this module will as well. This is actually the living quarters that are going to be on the space station, so it's kind of important that this gets out there. I kind of forgot that this had happened. So we're just going to dock up and transfer probably 1 fuel tank, like maybe the outboard fuel tank's worth of fuel, into this thing, and then we'll refuel everything better once we get to the station, fill up the Mun shuttle again and stuff. But this is part of the footage that was lost. I did show the launch, I believe, in the last episode of this, but the footage of it actually running out of fuel was some of the stuff that was lost on the corrupted hard drive, so kind of a little bit of a gap there that I completely forgot about while I've been editing this. But it's not too big of a deal because it's right around the Mun. We're going to have to be more careful about calculating fuel on other things. I think there was a little bit of trouble getting this thing launched, and so it ended up using more Delta V to get into orbit than I anticipated was what the problem was. I don't really remember exactly what happened to cause it. It seems unlike me to screw up that badly, but you never know. So I'm just going to dump tons of fuel into it, and we'll get this thing operational again here. Alright, so we transferred the fuel, we're separating again, and now we're going to get our rendezvous taken care of. And I'm just going to skip both of these rendezvous because they are just rendezvous and we've done it a billion times, so I'll meet you at the Mun Station. Alright, so we're coming in to the station here, and it looks like we have the the ship here first. I didn't want to leave these guys out in orbit without any place to be, really, so I decided to bring them in first, and then we'll bring the module in second because it doesn't have anybody on board. The drone can wait longer. I don't remember how much life support's on this thing exactly, but it's not a ton, so it seemed prudent to get these guys unloaded first here. Plus, if there's problems, it's good to have this ship here because it actually is fairly powerful in terms of RCS and in engines, so if there's problems, we can help maneuver things around using this ship too. And it's pretty much just a straightforward docking procedure here. We don't have the full docking array that we will later, but as you can see there, I'm using the main engines to just kind of burn towards the station. I like to do that to get a little bit of extra speed going, because if you just let MechJeb's docking autopilot do things, sometimes it takes like a ludicrous amount of time to try to get around. So I do a lot of the approach stuff if I'm coming in at a weird angle or anything like that, and then I'll have the autopilot actually do the final docking. And so what I'm doing here is just spinning around to what will be the correct orientation. I don't know why I didn't turn the other direction. I probably just picked one and went, so that we can get a little bit of braking done, and then we can get in the right orientation to dock here. And as you can probably see, I disabled the engines. I generally do that when I get to a space station because I don't want to accidentally hit shift with a bunch of docked ships and have everything go crazy and explode. So generally speaking, I do that at any of my space stations. And like you can see there, that the docking module is actually in place. There's going to be probably an additional one in the future. I think this will probably be the berth where this shuttle mainly goes, just because I kind of like having that observation window there. I don't know, it's kind of fun. So just keep on backing up. MechJeb was still giving me kind of a lot of trouble at this point in terms of flipping out and not docking correctly. It was really weird because it seemed like it was working right for a while, and then something happened and a newer version of MechJeb came out, and then this version didn't work right anymore. It was really kind of a weird thing. I didn't change anything. MechJeb just decided it didn't want to work anymore, but I updated it later and it ended up working fine. But it would just start randomly firing RCS in every direction and like halting its progress entirely and just holding its distance from space stations and stuff when I was trying to dock. So a lot of this I ended up having to tweak manually to get it to actually function correctly. I think it actually started spinning at a point and stuff, so it was just ugly, very ugly. But we ended up getting it docked in the end anyway, and now we're bringing in the habitat module. There's not a lot of light on this thing. There's one light there because really it's meant to be lit by the rest of the space station, so it's unfortunately a little bit dark and hard to see, but there we go, we're getting a little bit of light now. Like I said, it seems like everything's always in the dark when I'm trying to do things, but fortunately the light seems to be coming through a little bit now. I don't know where that light is coming from. I guess the space station. Oh, no, it was the sun. Okay, I was like, that seems like a really bright light for the space station. That makes more sense that it was the sun. So, fortunately for once, we're going to be doing docking in the sun. I love it. Doesn't happen enough. So, there's a little like T-junction on the front of this thing. There's going to be additional modules docked to it that we're going to end up having to rearrange and stuff too. This space station was put together a little more haphazardly than I usually do. I made a lot of design changes after parts of it were already up. I usually try to lay the whole thing out in the vehicle assembly building and pretty much stick to the plan, but for whatever reason I kept changing my mind on this space station, and it made it a little bit harder to actually get stuff done. And we come in a pretty close approach there. It's a little bit scary, but I knew what I was doing, I guess. So there is this thing's temporary home. We're going to end up, like I said, later rearranging it again, but get this thing positioned here, and hopefully MechJeb will actually cooperate and get it docked up here. But I think, again, I had MechJeb problems, so this docking took an inordinate amount of time because MechJeb was just flailing around. Yeah, look at it. It's actually doing all right there, but it just started flailing around and being stupid pretty much. So it was all time consuming and stuff, but we ended up getting it docked eventually, as you'll see a little bit later. And all that. See, like the RCS is just firing every... Look at that. Look, it's firing every RCS. I don't get it. Very weird. Very weird indeed. Alright, so we're back at Kerbal with another launch here. This is a ship that's designed to primarily just ferry crew back and forth between the surface of the Mun and the space station. So I kind of like purpose-built spaceships. They're kind of a thing I really enjoy. So this one's designed to be completely reusable like the Mun shuttles. And like I said, we're going to end up launching one to Minmus and the Mun, and they're just going to ferry crew down to this planet to do whatever they're doing. Probably set up a base on, at least on the Mun, and probably set up some temporary scientific bases at least on Minmus. I don't really think there's a huge point in building bases because there's not that much you can do, but you know, there's not much you can do that you can't just do by ferrying crew back and forth between the space station and the surface. I think the Mun will likely end up doing some kethane on too, so we'll end up needing some sort of mining rig for that in the future too. Maybe we'll do that around Minmus. I haven't really decided. If I do that, it will be a dedicated space station probably for that, because I don't like to include too much on one space station because it ends up kind of lagging things too much. So I'll probably build a second Mun station if it comes to that, and do the processing in orbit, and just have a fuel tanker and stuff like that so I can transfer fuel around. And there's no point really in sending kethane back to Kerbal, so it pretty much only be for stuff refueling at the Mun or at what's it called, Minmus. So at this point we're just doing our orbital burns and our transfers, and you kind of see the ship a little bit. Unfortunately, it's a little bit on the dark side here, but it's got 3 of the smaller engines on it. I forgot which ones those are, LV909s or something like that, and it's basically got room to bring a couple guys down and ferry them back and forth. I think it can hold a total of 4 crew members, and it's using the same home Bobcat home cockpit and the lander can, and then it's got plenty of fuel to make probably a few trips up and down from the surface. And we're using these intermediate transfer stages here just because I'm trying to not have to touch the fuel supply of this too much, because all the fuel that I use here obviously means I have to send more fuel out to the Mun. But I kind of was a little bit short on total fuel, so we ended up having to use some of the transfer burn, unfortunately, using the main engines for the lander. So that kind of sucked because, like I said, it means I'm going to have to bring more fuel out to the Mun, which is not a huge deal. The Mun isn't far away, but a lot of this I'm trying to use as practice stuff for when we go to Duna or anything like that, so we can kind of get the logistics worked out, because it's not a big deal to send something out to the Mun, but it is to send it out to Jewel or Duna or something like that. It takes a lot longer, so I want to make sure that we have the processes and the techniques down to get these transfers done as efficiently as possible, and still have fuel left to deal with all the stuff we want to deal with. And at this point, the little booster stage here, the orbital insertion stage, is pretty much done with fuel, so we're just going to ditch that thing. It's going to just stay in orbit forever, I guess. I didn't want the gallon of fuel that was left in it to throw off the calculations for the burn too much, because the thrust is going to be really different from that one engine versus the 3 landing engines, so I wanted to make sure that we didn't run into trouble with that. But at this point we're doing our transfer burn, and these little engines work reasonably well for getting this transfer done too. They're pretty efficient, and they definitely provide an okay amount of thrust for a little ship like this. So we'll get out there and lickety-split and dock up with the space station. And again, we're gonna just skip the rendezvous because it's been done a billion times here. And we're just doing our braking here now at the station. And this thing is asymmetrical in a way, I guess. Like, you know, it has the 3... it's built on the idea of 3s instead of 4s. It has 3 engines, and then also the RCS is arranged in 3s because it was a little bit challenging to figure out a way to put 4 RCS thrusters on each level here. And I don't know if it's just because MechJeb was having problems, but it made the ship real unstable with RCS. I think piloting myself, I didn't have so much problems, but again, MechJeb has been having issues. I ended up updating it later and it fixed it, but I don't know how well this ship is going to be working still. So we're just, look at those thrusters just firing randomly. It's crazy. But we're coming into dock next to the other ship, and I think this is where these 2 ships are permanently going to be housed, so that they, you know, everything should have a permanent berth that's going to be a regular ship here. And like I said, this is going to be solely making trips back and forth between the surface. It's its only purpose. And kind of wish I had a different cockpit, because it's kind of weird having the 2 cockpits right next to each other with such different ships, but kind of still limited in what I actually have available for command pods. So I like this one a lot for spaceships. It faces forward. The interior is actually kind of nice, even though it's a little Spartan and outdated now, but it doesn't have a lot of the fancy doodads that have later cockpits have had. It hasn't been updated in forever, I don't think. So at this point we are launching more components for the space station. I'm trying to see what this exact module is here. I can't get a good look at it in the dark here, so we're gonna have to wait a minute until we actually get up into orbit. But just trying to get this Mun Station done. I still have a couple modules I want to send to the regular space station as well. And that's a nice view of the sun and the Mun and Kerbal there. So again, we just skipped all the rendezvous, and this thing seemed to stop real quick. That was actually like good thrust to weight ratio apparently. That was a kind of ridiculous burn there. Alright, so we need to close the gap again. Oh, this is the inflatable ring. That's what this is. I could see it now. It's a inflatable centrifuge ring, basically. It's actually really cool. I forget which pack exactly this is from. It's from one of the base builder packs, but it's really cool. You'll see when it's in action here, but basically it has artificial gravity because it can it rotates and it inflates and becomes bigger, which is actually super duper cool. I really like this module, and I'm probably going to include at least one of these on every one of my deep space stations. I'm not going to put one on the one around Kerbal, probably, because it's already kind of done. And theoretically, people aren't really staying on the Kerbal space station for that long, so the lack of gravity wouldn't be as much of an issue. But for these deep space assignments, it's probably a good idea to put these on there so they don't have a muscle atrophy happen and all that stuff. They can, you know, do their little 2001 jogging around the centrifuge kind of nonsense. And it's cool because it's inflatable, so it gets it's got a more compact launch than it does when it's actually up here in orbit. And we're just putting this is again probably not, I think this probably is its permanent home here. We're gonna have to do some shuffling a little later. Like I said, I really changed my mind more than I usually do with this space station. For some reason the space station never hangs even. It keeps doing this stupid thing where it decides it's gonna get all crooked and stuff. It bugs me. When I switch back, the SAS will probably just straighten it right out, but it just continually does that. And slowly but surely, I think at this point I had fixed my MechJeb, because this is working perfectly. That's how MechJeb usually works. except now it's firing every thruster on the space station, but it usually does that. And I think this is where we're going to leave it for today. When we come back, we're going to do some shuffling around to get these modules where I actually want them. I actually want this one docked directly to the core of the space station and the habitat module on the outside, so I could have probably planned that better, but we'll fix it in the next episode and get a couple more things up here. I think we have some launches coming up for Moho and stuff too, so thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.